Good evening. A woman who was a teenage victim of sex trafficking says she's still being punished because of criminal convictions linked to her sexual exploitation. She appeared in court repeatedly for soliciting after being forced into prostitution by men who controlled her life. Her past convictions means her life and career prospects are compromised. She fears many others are in the same position. She's now receiving specialist help as a victim of modern-day slavery. She told her harrowing story to our reporter Joanne Riddle. Her words have been revoiced to protect her identity.
I spent more than 20 years thinking I had been a criminal.
This woman finally realised she was actually a vulnerable survivor when the media spotlight fell on Telford and she saw reports about child sexual exploitation. But her abuse took place elsewhere in the West Midlands, including Birmingham and also in London.
For the first time, the penny dropped. I'd had a year of therapy to come to terms with the fact that I'd been a victim.
Jane isn't her real name. She told me she was groomed by a man she thought was her boyfriend from the age of 16, but eventually he forced her into prostitution.
And did he beat you?
Yes, regularly. Very badly. I'd be locked in flats. The violence was horrific.
And she was regularly attacked in the years that followed. Her clients included a head teacher and men from all walks of life.
I became this empty soul, detached from society and life, like I was living in a parallel universe to everybody else.
Jane repeatedly appeared before magistrates for soliciting and even attempted suicide. She eventually escaped from her abusers, but decades on, despite now having a degree, she avoids applying for work requiring disclosure and barring service checks, which are carried out in a range of situations, including for working with children to check for past convictions.
I can't volunteer to help at school or brownies or other things mums might want to do. I couldn't be a teacher. I couldn't even be a school cleaner.
The National Council of Women and the Salvation Army have called on the Home Office to do a consultation about women whose historical soliciting offences mean they're unable to move on with their lives. Many, they say, like Jane, will have been vulnerable and coerced.
As a survivor of modern slavery, Jane's now receiving help through the government's national referral mechanism. It means she gets specialist support from the Salvation Army via its national hub for modern-day slavery support in Birmingham. Anne-Marie Gifford helps slavery victims and survivors.
They are affected in so many different ways in, being able to support their children, either financially through jobs that they may or may not be able to apply for, or the fact that they want to go on a school trip with them, and they make choices based on their knowledge of the fact they've got a marked DBS, and they limit themselves because they can't risk letting that be known.
The Home Office told us the government wants to ensure that all victims and survivors of sexual abuse and exploitation feel they can come forward to report abuse and get the support they need when they do. We're committed to working across government to ensure these people are able to move on from the abuse they've suffered, including those with criminal convictions or cautions. Jane's come a long way since finally reaching out for help a year ago. Her case is complex and taking a long time to unravel, but she remains determined.
Girls have been criminalised. I know there are so many girls completely unaware they were victims. I'm educated and I have gone more than 20 years of my life not knowing or realising. I was so ashamed. It's humiliating, degrading, it's completely soul-destroying. And it's something that's happened to me since being a teenager.
Joanne Riddle, BBC Midlands Today.
Well, Louise Haigh is the Shadow Policing Minister. She's worked with Rotherham grooming survivors and she's also seeking to get a change to the law to help victims of abuse. I spoke to her earlier and asked how widespread a problem she believes this is.
Well, I've worked with lots of victims of child sexual exploitation, of grooming, of those who've lived through abuse in their childhood, and the vast majority of them will have had, if not criminal records, many of them criminal records, but at the very least contact with police. And they are more than aware of the implications that that will have when they apply for jobs, when they apply for positions that are involved with children, involved with safeguarding. All of that will show up on their enhanced disclosure and barring service check, and it puts them off. And these are people that very often have been failed time and time again by the state, by various authorities, whether it's by the police, by CPS, by local authorities, and now we're failing them all over again.
You're looking to get a criminal offences bill through Parliament which might help survivors like Jane. What changes are you looking for?
So we need to see an automatic right for people that have been through criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation, to have their criminal records reviewed and removed of the crimes that are associated with their grooming. So crimes like this that Jane's just described that should never have been prosecuted and brought against her in the first place shouldn't be allowed to blight her for the rest of her life in terms of applying for jobs, in terms of just trying to be a fully functioning member of society.
And can this be addressed more locally? Do police chief constables have any powers to look at individual cases, to remove their criminal record to enable them to move on?
At the moment, chief constables do have the discretion to be able to review an individual's criminal record and remove them if they believe that it shouldn't be on there. I've worked with individuals to have that and achieve that, but very few people know that they have that right, and it is purely at the discretion of each individual chief constable. What we need to do is flip the presumption to make sure that victims of exploitation who have received criminal offences through no personal guilt of their own, purely through their exploitation, have the right to have that removed, and they understand clearly that right, and the law enables that specifically.
Louise Haigh, Shadow Policing Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues in our report, you can call the BBC Action Line for advice. The number is 0800 066 066. Calls are free and lines are open 24 hours a day.